In this video, I'm going to share a super simple way to create dendritic shapes on collage papers. This is actually the second time I've made this type of paper for Tune In Tuesday, but this time the supplies are much easier than the first. You just need 2 equal sized pieces of paper and acrylic paint. To check out my other video on how to make dendritic papers, click on the word "more" underneath this video, where you'll find a link to the other dendritic art demo. Hello, my name is Catherine Rains. I'm a mixed media collage artist, and welcome to Tune In Tuesday, where I share art demos to expand your mixed media toolbox. If you see value in my art demos, I would deeply appreciate a thumbs up, and if you would subscribe to my channel below. Links for the minimal supplies to make this type of dendritic paper are down below under the word "more." And while you're there, you might also want to check out my free 5-lesson online workshop, Collage Kickstart, where I teach you how to use all the collage papers taught during Tune In Tuesday to make fabulous collages the very first try. So let's get into creating dendritic shapes on collage papers. The supplies to make this paper are super simple. I'm using a mixed media paper. This is 108 pounds, but you can use any paper that has a bit of thickness to it. So a Bristol paper, Stonehenge, watercolor paper, all of those would work well for this. I also pulled out an assortment of my paints. I've got 3 different golds, I've got a white. I also have my 2 primaries that I use for all my papers, Phthalo Blue Green Shade and Hansa Yellow Light. I've pulled out 2 pieces of equal sized paper, and I'm gonna do this on MDF board. These are just boards that I had cut at the hardware store. You don't have to do it on these boards at all. You can do it just on your work table. But because I'm going to be covering each one of these pieces of paper with a lot of paint, I want to keep my table as clean as possible. So putting it on boards means I can just lift the board off and I still have a clean table underneath. So it's just practicality here. So to begin our experiments, I'm going to take one of the golds out of my stash. This is just an old gold. I don't use Lucas Crystal Studio very often, but I've got a supply of this gold. It's a nice neutral. So what you do is you put a nice blob on each one. You want a fair amount of paint to cover the surface. And then you just spread this out. Now I may not have enough paint. We'll see. It's kind of like you kind of figure this out as you go by feel, depending on what kind of results you get. So I'm just going to spread it out fairly evenly, and it's pretty thick on here. Do the same thing on the second sheet. So I'm trying to make it so that there's not any thin spots on here. So I want it to be all fairly thick on both sides of this paper. I'm going to put a little more paint on here because I see some edges that are a little thin, and having thick paint makes this work better. But you want this very wet and fairly thick. I do not have to have it completely smoothed out though. And then here comes the magic. You take one sheet and you carefully place it over the other sheet. And because these are both wet, I can move them around a little bit so they kind of line up as much as I can. And then I just press a little bit so that they are attached to each other. And then you just pull the top sheet off and see what you get. Oh my gosh. And every time it's magic. Look at the texture created there. So what is so amazing about this is that I've got a beautiful piece of gold neutral paper, and it is what I would consider a subtle texture. So I place this next to a piece of collage paper that has a lot more pattern to it. This will create a lovely contrast. And I have 2 of them. This is pretty thick paint, so it's going to have to dry a little bit, but I'll show you that when it dries, it'll look just like this, basically. This is so much fun to do that I want to try it with all of my paints. So I'm going to try it with a little bit different gold. This is a Nova Sun Gold, and I don't think I've ever used it before. It's a little bit of different consistency than the Luca paint. Again, I'm just looking for a fairly thick application of the paint, so this is completely covered. I have to work fairly quickly or this paint will dry and this won't work. And again, I take one sheet, place it on top of the other, try to line them up as much as I can, and a totally different dendritic painting. Look at that. So it's much smaller print. So each type of paint, each texture of paint will come out a little differently, and it also depends on how heavily you apply it. So right here, I still have dendritic patterning, but the paint was much lighter, which I like that too. It's going to be very effective in a collage. I'm going to try this with another Nova paint. It's called Super Pearl Gold, because I would like to have one that's kind of on the white side. Oh, I think this is going to be gorgeous. Again, you can leave all the brush strokes in. Don't need to be that perfect about this. Take one sheet, place it over the next. This is really a very cool process because it's very forgiving. I can move them around so that they are very close to being on top of each other. Again, I'm just going to press it down a bit. Wow, what a beautiful piece of neutral collage paper. And I've got two. Now I'm going to try doing some with color, and I'm going to mix this paint right on the paper. So I got my phthalo blue-green shade, add a tiny bit of yellow to that, add some white to make it a lighter color. So I'm kind of getting a sense of how much paint I need on each sheet to get what I want. And I'm going to mix it together right here just to save the time of mixing it on a separate piece of paper. I think it might be cool to have a little bit of variation in the color too, not all just one color. Although I did mix it pretty well right there, so it's pretty close to uniform. Oh, wow. Look at that subtle color. Or I should say the subtle pattern is so beautiful. And I've got a matching set. And I'm going to try to make a really light colored one. Ooh, that's more blue than I wanted. So I'm going to put a little blue on here. Actually, it might be interesting to have different amounts of the color on each one. We'll see. So I'm going to add a lot of white into this one so I get a much lighter color. Again, I'll mix it right on the paper itself. Just for fun, I'm going to add even more white onto this. Let's see what will happen when I put one color that's lighter on top of the other. Total experiment here. Oh my goodness. Wow. I love that. It's almost like an ocean. So this is just half of the papers that I made, probably in like 15 minutes. And I learned so much about how to get different kinds of textures just by the amount of paint that you put down. For instance, this had a thinner layer of paint. I got smaller dendritic shapes or textures, whereas this was very thick paint and I got really thick dendritic patterns. And my personal preference is either the gold or even this white, which, you know, when I cut this up and place it next to more patterned papers, this will just be a lovely contrast to a patterned collage paper. I also love the really lighter blue ones, which I actually did off camera. And although I think this little darker one is lovely, has great pattern in it, it's not my preference just because it doesn't have enough interest for me. However, all of these are beautiful. They'll look fantastic next to more patterned papers. And as always the case, it's going to be hard for me to stop making these because, one, they're so fast and easy to do. And I just love the end result of these. I hope that you enjoy making these very intriguing collage papers as well. To learn how to make many more types of collage papers, check out the links that are about to appear right here. And be sure to join my free 5-lesson online class, Collage Kickstart. The link to sign up is under the word more below. And if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, I would be deeply grateful if you would. And I'll see you here next week for another Tune In Tuesday.